In this week's nail tutorial, I'll be showing you how to do these polygel nails with KIKI'S delivery service themed Halloween nail art, so stay tuned. So this is going to be a really in-depth tutorial. It's 40+ minutes, so sit back and enjoy. We are starting off with our nail prep, so just taking a cuticle pusher and pushing back that cuticle very gently. And we are being gentle, but we're also being very thorough. I want to make sure that I'm getting into those corners and not missing any areas. A good long-lasting set always starts with a thorough nail prep, so definitely take your time with this. So if you are struggling with your polygel nails lifting, I would definitely recommend taking a look at your nail prep and just slowing things down. You can already see how much is coming up from my own nails here. And I'm also going to be using a micro taper bit from Erica's ATA. This is a cuticle bit, and I'm using this with my Melody CZE file at a very low speed, about 4 RPMs. And we're just going to further clean up that cuticle area with that as well. And finishing off with a fine grit sanding band. So this is a 240 grit, and I wanted to try out the mini mandrel bit. I've seen a lot of people using these, and I figured I'd give it a try. Usually I use a regular sized mandrel bit. I can't say I'm a huge fan, but I feel like the one that I ordered wasn't that great. So you're gonna see me switch back to the regular sanding band in a little bit here. But nonetheless, I do use some sort of fine grit sanding band on the nail plate just to remove the shine and clean up anything that's left over. Next, we're gonna be taking our square nail tips from the Bougie Bar. These are my favorite square tips to use at the moment, and we're just gonna make sure they fit sidewall to sidewall. This one is a little bit small. You can see that there's a little gap on the side, and I really had to press it down. It should fit nicely from sidewall to sidewall without having to force it down or having to put too much pressure. So you can see that these sizes are a much better fit. Then we're gonna go ahead and dehydrate and cleanse with Young Nail Swipe, or you can use isopropyl alcohol or acetone, whatever you prefer. You just wanna make sure you're using some sort of dehydrator to remove any oils and lint from the nail plate, and making sure that we just have a really nice clean surface to glue on our nail tips. I do love applying polygel over half cover nail tips. I don't personally use dual forms. I know that using half cover nail tips can seem really intimidating, but I do feel like it's just a lot easier in the long run to do it that way, and you're gonna get a lot better retention. So that's just personally what's worked for me. So I just applied over half cover tips like I would acrylic. Just taking a little bit of brush on nail glue from Young Nails and applying our nail tips with that, holding down for about 10 seconds, and that usually helps them stay on pretty well. I do like using a brush on nail glue. I just feel like it's a lot cleaner and a lot less messy than the ones that squeeze out of a bottle. So we're gonna go ahead and repeat that here. You don't wanna put too much nail glue. That also kind of can make them pop off and not stick. You don't wanna flood the nail with product. So just the right amount in the center, and then go ahead and just pop that nail on there and hold down for about 10 seconds. You can see I was kind of measuring from the knuckle just to try to make it as straight as I could. And to cut down our nail tips, I like using a nail tip cutter. This is from Pana as well, and some mini magnets, and just making sure I cut them the same length based on how many magnets I put on there. So that technique works pretty well, and I did end up cutting these a little bit shorter than I would have liked, but we're gonna make it work. And then I'm just using a regular 240 grit sanding band. You can see I switched back to a regular size here just to blend the nail tip with the natural nail and removing the shine from the nail tip as well. I feel like this also helps retention. It kind of gives it a roughed up surface for the polygel to stick to, and then blending the nail tip just kind of helps it look a little bit more seamless. And then we're gonna go ahead and remove all the dust with some alcohol, and then taking our primer, which is Young Nails Protein Bond, and applying a layer of that. I like to start at the bottom and then work my way up. Too much primer can also cause lifting, so we wanna be mindful of that as well. And then we're gonna apply a gel base coat. You can use any gel base coat or a rubber base coat. And I've done videos on this on my TikTok more in depth. I've had a few questions about gel base coat, and it is an important part of polygel just because polygel is a hybrid gel system. It's made up of gel and acrylic, so you need some sort of gel base coat for there to be an anchor and a really strong foundation for your polygel to stick to, just like other gel enhancements that use and require some sort of gel base coat before application. So this is an important part of your retention. So once you apply a layer of your gel base coat, you want to fully cure it in your lamp and then just leave that sticky layer on there. I'm using this gel polish color called Aurora Petal. This is a really cool kind of liquid chrome pinkish purple gel polish that's actually going to be releasing very soon as part of my first gel polish collection. So I thought it would be really fun to incorporate this as part of the polygel and ombre over it. I thought it would fit really nicely with the KIKI'S delivery service theme and kind of the, you know, pink and purple vibe that we're going for here. We are doing a Halloween set, but you know, we're going to incorporate a lot of pink and purple. So I just thought this would be a really cool color to ombre over, and you can see how pigmented it is. It adds a really nice touch to any set, so I'm gonna be really excited to release that. Now we're taking our polygel brush. So this is also a brush that I'm gonna be releasing soon as part of our first collection as well. This is the polygel / hybrid gel brush that I've designed. I showed this in my last video as well, but it has this really cool acetone-free chrome handle. And then the brush head itself, I've kind of designed to be what I find works best for polygel. So it has kind of a rounded tapered top that works really well with the cuticle area. And then the bristles are a little bit thicker towards the base. So I wanted to make sure there was some thickness towards the bottom and then it tapered off towards the top so that you have some bulk towards the bottom so that you can use the body of the brush to apply your polygel and use that patting motion when needed, but also having the really precise tapering at the top for the cuticle area. So super excited to release that as well. We're just taking our 70% isopropyl alcohol, which is what I like to use for my slip solution, and getting some on our brush and getting some of the liquid out just so that it's not too wet. So you can ombre over pretty much any type of gel polish when it comes to polygel, just like you would with acrylic. You just want to make sure that once you've applied that gel polish on your tips, that you fully cure it and then encapsulate it with the clear polygel. So you can use any sort of clear polygel here. So I'm just applying a thin layer of that at the free edge and then making sure that we try to cover anywhere that we've applied that gel polish so that when we go to file, we don't accidentally file away that really nice gel polish color. So we're just using a motion of patting and then dragging and then making sure we remove any excess product at the free edge. Whenever you're applying polygel, you want to make sure that you pat first into place and then you go ahead and use a dragging motion to spread the rest of the product out. But you just kind of want to be mindful of working on top of the product and not using too much pressure, or else you might drag all of the product down accidentally. So it just takes a little bit getting used to. And then you want to make sure you're constantly swiping the sidewalls as well. That's going to help retain your shape and make sure that your nails don't end up looking too bulky. And the great thing about polygel is because of its consistency, you can work in kind of a forward and reverse motion. So kind of how I was brushing upwards there, you can do that really easily with polygel as well, so that you can move the product back up if you needed to, spread it back that way if needed. So once we apply a layer of clear over all of our nail tips where we have the gel polish, we're gonna go ahead and fully cure that, and then we'll jump into applying our pink polygel that we're gonna be using today as part of our nail design. So I'm also super excited to share a polygel color that we'll be releasing as part of our first collection as well. There's going to be 4 neutral colors, and we're going to be using this one today called Coquette Blush. It's a really nice soft pink color. So this is going to be a pack of 4 hybrid gels that you could purchase individually or as a pack. So this is the color that we're going to use today. As you can see, it's a really light, soft, nice pink color. So we're going to go ahead and do an ombre type design with this. And we're just placing a bead just below the cuticle area and tucking it into the corners, using the body of our brush to flatten that out and using those light tapping motions. And this is kind of what I mean about working on top of the product with light pressure. Especially if you're doing an ombre, you want to use the more tapered tip of your brush to kind of lightly feather that product down. So once we cure that, we're going to move on to the next nail, and again placing that product just below the cuticle area, patting it down and then feathering that downwards and blending it into the color on the free edge. So I feel like the key with the cuticle area is making it kind of into this shape here and kind of getting it kind of uniformly patted down, if that makes sense, and not too lumpy or uneven. And then once you have it in that shape, all you have to do is tap lightly into the corners around it using the edges of your brush, tilted upwards, sidewards, wherever you need as you go around kind of the perimeter. So kind of placing the polygel into that shape and using that technique will really help with the cuticle area. And that's what I've kind of found works best for me. It's just getting it nicely placed in the center and then using the edges of my brush to tuck it into those corners. And then again, since we're doing the ombre here, we're gonna feather the rest down lightly. This Coquette blush color is such a nice soft pink, and it just went so perfectly with this set. Once we fully cured that, if you feel like there's a gap on some of your nails and you didn't apply enough clear polygel, you can go ahead and apply another bead of that. I like to work in multiple beads, and I prefer doing that because I feel like it gives me a little bit more control over the product versus applying everything in one big kind of blob of polygel, and I do recommend that for beginners as well. That's another great thing about polygel / hybrid gel is that you can always go back and add more. So wherever you do need a little bit more of that clear polygel, just go ahead and add that, and you can go ahead and feather that upwards as well, and it'll blend really nicely with the pink as well since it is clear. And since we do have some length on these nails, we do want to make sure that we have enough product on the free edge as well and just have a really nice structure all around. So adding that extra bead will definitely help if you need it on some of the nails. Here, moving on to shaping. So we're going to use our N95 mask, our Melody Susie E file, our Young Nails dust collector, safety glasses, and we're starting off with the 5-in-1 Panna bit. This is a fine grit one. So I like to clean up the cuticle area first, and I do this first because I feel like it helps me visually see where I need to shape more or less, because it's not necessarily about mindlessly just following a routine. You kind of want to be intentional about where you're shaping, and you don't want to shape where it's not needed. So once we clean up that area that I'm pointing to here, you're going to visually see where you actually need to shape more with your other drill bits in your file. And I just feel like that helps me more if I am able to do that first versus last in the routine, which is typically how you see it. But definitely see what works best for you. If you feel like you want to switch around any of these steps, you can definitely do that. And you can see that this bit really helps carve out that cuticle area. You just want to make sure you're using it parallel to the nail plate and that you're not digging into the nail. Let the drill bit do the work for you. I use it on a pretty low speed, about 4 to 5 RPMs. And the tapered cone shape also helps you in other areas of the nail, as I was just doing there. You can use kind of the bulkier part of that drill bit to debulk and file in other parts of the apex, and it'll help kind of get a cohesive shape in that area overall. And once I've used that drill bit on all of the nails, I'm gonna move on to the round panna bit. So this is a coarse grit drill bit, so it's a lot more rough, and it has a rounded top. So for that reason, it's pretty versatile. I like to use this over the entire surface of the nail. I feel like it's really great for debulking and just making sure that everything is nice and evened out. This shape also really helps kind of create that I don't know what's the best way to describe this, but like when you think of like how the structure of a nail enhancement should typically be for retention and just kind of what's aesthetically pleasing usually, you know, you kind of want it to be thinner towards the sides and, you know, having the bulk towards the middle, but you want like a nice transition. It's kind of like the apex, but you know, just kind of like that general shape across the nail. I'm sure there's a word for it. I'm just blanking on it right now, but anyways, that rounded top really helps with that as well when you're going from side to side along the nail, which you'll see me do here in a second. And then again, of course, it's really good for debulking when you're kind of going in this motion as well. If you feel like there's a little bit too much product in the apex area, it's a little bit too bulky, this drill bit really helps with that as well. And then it also helps carve out that cuticle area. It doesn't have the tapered top like the 5-in-1 bit, but it does still help with the cuticle area. And this is the motion that I'm talking about here that kind of helps create that nice structure that really nicely transitions from bottom to top. And then I also use this drill bit under the nail if I need to clean anything up, or if you want to kind of further carve out that C curve, it really helps with that as well. These clips are a little bit sped up, but one thing that's good to keep in mind with polygel is that you don't have to apply as much pressure because it is softer than acrylic. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's weaker, but it is a hybrid gel, right? It does have gel in it, so it's gonna file away a lot more easily than like acrylic, for example. So a little bit of shaping really goes a long way. So these clips are a little bit sped up, so it may look a little bit more like I'm using more pressure than I really am, but I really just try to let the drill bit do the work for me. So this is why kind of just using a coarse grit in this case, and then just putting it at kind of a medium speed and letting it do the work for you really helps. And then it's also really great for under the nail. If there's anything under the sidewalls, you can use the drill bit for that as well. Now moving on to hand filing. So I like to use an 80/80 grit hand file. I'm just seasoning the edges so that we don't cut ourselves because this is a pretty coarse file. And this is where the shaping really starts to come together. Hand filing really ties everything together. I feel like it's the combination of the e-file and hand filing that's really important. So I like to start underneath the nail and just make sure that those sidewalls are nice and crisp, and if there's any product hanging under there, we remove that. You just want to make sure you're kind of keeping your file as straight and maintaining even contact so you don't accidentally create any sort of notch. And then from there, I like to file against the sidewalls, so if there's any bulkiness or anything's uneven, this is where we can kind of perfect that shape and trying to keep the file as straight as possible again, since we are going for a square shape here. And then finishing off on top of the nail, so filing over the surface of the nail also helps kind of get rid of any unevenness there might be and just create a fully kind of cohesive, even nail surface if there's any bumpy or uneven areas. And then finishing off with the free edge, I just try to pull away so that I don't accidentally create a notch or file too much into the corners. And this is how the nail is looking. So we're gonna go ahead and repeat that on the other nail. So again, starting underneath the sidewall and trying to stay away from those corners. You'll see that I try to avoid them for the most part or keep the pressure really light there, because I've definitely made the mistake of filing into those corners and then accidentally ruining that square shape. So I try to keep the focus of my filing away from that and just keep the pressure light there if needed. And then just try to keep my file constantly moving. It's really easy to overfile. But if you keep your file moving and you're kind of filing, checking, you can kind of visually just observe where you need to file more or less. Kind of like I said earlier, it's not just about kind of mindlessly filing. You do want to kind of visually try to see where you need to file more. And this is kind of where I'm pointing out that, you know, filing over the surface of the nail makes a huge difference. I didn't used to do this before, but once I started doing that, I feel like it really made the surface a lot more even and kind of got rid of any unevenness that I may have not been able to with my e-file with the nail drill. And you can kind of just see the difference that hand filing really makes. Like it really just, that subtle difference really brings the whole shape together. Especially when it comes to square nails, I'm very particular because I feel like I just want it to be that perfect square. And if you think of what a square shape looks like, it has, you know, 4 very distinct corners. So I just want to make sure those sidewalls are as straight as possible and that the free edge is as kind of squared off and as crispy as possible as well. And you can see I'm kind of using odd motions and angles here because filing your own nails is quite the task. it's a lot of pressure that you're putting on there, and trying to keep your hand straight while filming can be a challenge. And then we're gonna finish off with cuticle oil and buffing. So sometimes I do this with a fine grit sanding band, and I don't always use cuticle oil, but it's been a while since I've done this, and it does definitely give you a really nice even finish. And I would recommend buffing, or at least using a 240 grit sanding band in general, just so that you can kind of bring back that really smooth surface. That's gonna be really helpful when it comes to nail art. So once we dehydrate again and use alcohol to remove any leftover oils, dust, we're gonna apply a matte top coat, and you've probably seen this in some of my other videos if you've watched kind of the more complex nail tutorials, but this is really helpful for more complicated nail art because it creates a really smooth surface. It's gonna make it feel like your nail brush is just gliding against the nail surface, and it creates a really like silky finish. So I like to do this whenever I'm gonna be doing a little bit more complex nail art. So I just apply a layer of that matte top coat, fully cure, and then wipe off that sticky layer. And then we are gonna put a shiny top coat back at the end. So there's definitely no issues with that. You can do a matte finish or a glossy finish, whichever you prefer at the end. And let's get right into the nail art. So we are gonna be doing a Halloween themed KIKI'S delivery service nail set. So I'm gonna be drawing Kiki here on this nail first. So I'm just sketching out the outline of her face with a shading gel. This is kind of like a translucent black gel polish, and this doesn't need to be perfect. It just kind of gives us an outline of where we want to start color blocking. So once we've drawn the outline, I'm gonna mix together these two colors to create kind of an in-between shade for her face. So I mix a lot of colors. I try to show it as much as I can on camera. So that kind of created a really nice shade that was pretty close to the photo that I was looking at. And so we're just gonna go ahead and start filling this in. This is where like having the sketch is helpful because it gives you an outline, but it doesn't need to be perfect because we're gonna start adding in more details and, you know, maybe making some of those lines more curved, or adding, you know, more product in certain areas as we go through and fill this in. So I wouldn't worry too much about the sketch being perfect. You just kind of want to break things down piece by piece, shape by shape, and it will all come together. And for her purple dress, I wanted to use something a little bit more out there since this is Halloween themed. So I'm using this gel polish color called Plum Elixir that's also releasing as part of our gel polish collection very soon. So this is a really nice plum color with a very fine shimmer / velvet finish. It has a little bit of a black undertone as well. It's really great for fall and winter. And I felt like this just added a really nice pop of detail to her dress, just to make it a little bit more fitting for the Halloween theme. We're gonna be adding some subtle details here and there, just to make it a little bit more spooky. So we're just gonna fill in the rest of that area and then fully cure it. And then we're gonna work on her hair next. So I originally mixed this chocolate brown color with this deeper brown and applied that for the hair, and it wasn't the exact color that I wanted, so I ended up mixing in this oracle color and then applying that mixture over. Just trying to be like as transparent as possible here. Like, this is art at the end of the day. It's not a linear robotic process, and it is kind of just being creative, making adjustments, going with the flow when things don't really turn out the way you'd like, and having fun with it. So we're gonna go ahead and apply that over. And for her hair, you just wanna make sure you add in some kind of swoopy details at the edges, because most of the photos, if you see, her hair kind of has that swooping detail, kind of like, you know, she's typically on her broomstick flying, so it's kind of just the effect of like her hair is literally, you know, blowing in the wind. So I added a little bit of that, and then we're gonna add a little bit more of that with shading once we cure this first layer here. So it kind of depends on like what kind of style you're going for, but I do feel like in general adding shading really helps, or at least like kind of layering different colors. So I went back in and added some of that darker brown around the edges, and it kind of helped create that swooping motion that I was talking about, and just add some more depth and texture to her hair. And then once that's cured, I went back in with some black shading gel as well on the very bottom of her hair, just to create again more of that kind of jagged kind of swooping motion and add in that texture there, make her hair look a little bit more full and not so flat and not so one-dimensional. So yeah, there's really no like set technique to shading. What I find is just kind of working in layers and using a little bit of the color a little bit at a time, you know, just kind of see how it looks, and feathering that in very light motions is usually what works best. And you will get the hang of it and kind of go with the flow of it as you get more used to it. And then we're gonna draw a witch's hat, of course, because this is a spooky set. So that was pretty simple, just kind of a long line and then a kind of rounded curved triangle for her, for the hat itself. And then once we fully cure that, we're gonna draw her bow, of course. We can't forget her red bow, so I just went ahead and added that to the witch's hat. Just a large red circle in the center, and then gonna draw both sides of the bow after that. I'm using a red liner gel for this just because it has a thicker consistency and it popped out a lot more than if I just used regular gel polish. It also gave me a little bit more control over the product. So just two kind of rounded triangles on the side, and then I ended up making it a little bit bigger on one side, so I wanted to go ahead and even that out. I wanted to make sure that the bow really popped out because that is such an iconic part of KIKI'S delivery service and that movie. If you haven't ever seen it, I would recommend it. So for the eyes, I did a white circle with the dotting tool and then black, and then using a very small brush to add in the details under her eye, her eyebrow, and then adding a white dot in the center, a little bit of pink under for the blush, and then a very faint line for her mouth and chin. And then I mixed together that yellowish color with kind of a coral. I don't know if that's the right color, but it's kind of like a pinkish orange just to draw her little bag that she has on in the movie. Just wanted to add that in to add in a little bit more detail to the dress. And her messenger bag is also another kind of iconic part of the movie and her character. Now we're just taking a black liner gel and outlining everything. This is always the hardest part, but it does all come together in the end, so I wouldn't worry about making it too perfect because we are gonna add a little bit more shading as well. I mixed that coral color with a little bit of red and then added some top coat to water it down a little bit. And then we're just feathering that in with this blender brush over the base color that we had once it's fully cured. This is gonna add a little bit more texture and dimension as well and just make it look a little bit more interesting and not so one-dimensional. And then I added a little bit of shading on her dress as well. And then that was more than enough. So I went ahead and cured everything and top coated it. That was the most complicated part of this set, so I like to start with that first. Now we're gonna draw a pumpkin, so just drawing a U shape and then two very curved lines on the side and then a curved line on the bottom. This is kind of like a flattened round shape, circular shape, if that makes sense. It's not a perfect circle, but it's kind of like a square circle. And then we're gonna go ahead and fill that in and then kind of accentuate those curved lines if needed. And the reason we're drawing this giant pumpkin is we're gonna draw Jiji, which is the black cat that's in the movie KIKI'S delivery service. We're gonna draw him in the center of the pumpkin, so I thought that would be a fun design. We're outlining the pumpkin with an orange gel paint just to add a little bit more detail. And we're adding the lines of the pumpkin as well and any details for that. And then I mixed some orange with some yellow just to create a lighter color. And then we're gonna go ahead and draw kind of the jack-o'-lantern features here. So kind of the upside down U. It's kind of like almost like a boomerang shape just for the eyes. And I'm using a really tiny brush for this. And we're gonna repeat that on the other side. And I would definitely recommend curing everything underneath, or at least flash curing first, and then you can go back and do a full cure. And then a little triangle for the nose, and then just kind of these zigzag lines for the mouth. Just a combination of kind of curved lines and then blocky lines. You just kind of want to follow the pattern. And then I went ahead and mixed some brown with some white. These are also gel liners, and then added a little bit more brown gel polish. And we are gonna use this mixture just to lightly outline everything we've drawn for the jack-o'-lantern, using a micro detailer brush for this. And now we're gonna move on to drawing Jiji. So his head is basically a football shape. So I went ahead and drew that, kind of the two curved lines connecting. I think it really does look like a football shape, so I would kind of imagine that as a reference point. And then we're gonna go ahead and draw his body, just two curved lines. Just breaking this down piece by piece. He's basically sitting on top of the pumpkin. So we're gonna go ahead and fill in the rest of his body there with a black gel paint, or you can use a black gel polish, whichever you prefer. If you are using a black gel paint, you just kind of want to be a little bit mindful of how much product you use because it is a little bit thicker. So Just want to make sure you're doing an even layer so it can fully cure. And then for the ears, it's two very kind of angled large triangles. His ears are pretty dramatic, so you can see it's like a curved triangle that's coming at an angle. And I only filled in part of it, and then kind of the inside of his ear, I'm gonna use that plum elixir color just to add in a little bit more detail and kind of make that detail pop out as well. Also making it in line with KIKI'S dress so that it kind of matches. And two very large white circles with a dotting tool for the eyes, and then a black inside, and then a small dot for his nose, and then just drawing kind of what would be an outline of his arms and legs, just 3 lines. And then just to kind of tie everything together, I wanted to do the whiskers and an orange outline. This was kind of in line with the reference picture that I used. So orange is obviously very in line with Halloween, so this worked really well. And I think the orange whiskers work together really nicely as well. And then we went ahead and cured everything and top coated it. And once you've cured your top coat, if you feel like you've kind of lost a little bit of your shape, you know, a lot of gel polish going on here, you can go ahead and file lightly under the sides and just square off that free edge again. Next, we are doing an isolated chrome design. So you want to start off with the matte top coat for this, which we've already done. And once that matte top coat is fully cured, you want to wipe off that layer with Young Nail Swipe, or at least acetone/alcohol. You want to get in there more than you normally would, just with like regular dehydrating, to make sure you have a really clean surface so the chrome doesn't stick. And then we're gonna mix a black gel polish with a non-wipe top coat, or if you have a non-wipe gel, that'll work fine. But I don't have that on hand, so I just mix top coat, and I do a little bit more top coat than black gel polish. The only downside to this is it's gonna be more runny, so it's a little bit harder to get like really precise nail art, but it definitely works in the meantime and gets the job done. So I'm just taking that mixture and drawing some details here, just a small moon and then some stars. And you don't want to cure this just yet. You want to wait till you've fully drawn your full design if possible. And once you've drawn the full design, you're going to cure for about 20 seconds is what I find works really well with the Koopa top coat. And then you just want to rub in your chrome powder, and you'll see that it's already sticking to the nail design. This is always like the most stressful moment. Like, is it gonna isolate? Is it not? So it's always very relieving when it does stick where you want it to, and then you can go ahead and wipe off the excess with a makeup sponge. A makeup sponge works so much better than a brush. It just really helps pick up those fine particles, so I would definitely recommend getting a pack off Amazon just so you have those ready. And then we're gonna go ahead and top coat that chrome. I do cure once more before I top coat it, and this is just to make sure that it's all nice and sealed in so we can continue on with our nail design without worrying that it'll mess up. Now we're gonna be drawing this really cute silhouette of Kiki on her broom, flying in the middle of the night, delivering her packages. So we're drawing the broomstick first, so that's pretty simple, just kind of a line with a triangle and just kind of feathering that out. Then we're gonna draw the outline of her dress, which is kind of like this bell shape on one side, and then the other side just has this little rectangle for the sleeve, and then just kind of curved at the bottom for the top of her dress. So we're just taking this piece by piece again. I just try to break it down shape by shape and try to get the proportions as closely as I can, but I do go back and like accentuate things a little bit, add a little bit more product where needed, make it more round like I'm doing here to make sure it looks nice and even. And when I do make a mistake, I use this Acamore 3D brush off of Amazon. It works really great just to clean up any small area so that you can just continue on with your design and not have to erase the whole thing. And then for her feet, we're just drawing this little kind of angled, kind of hockey stick shape. And then we're gonna take our micro detailer brush and then round out the foot a little bit so that it looks a little bit more like she's wearing her shoes versus an actual hockey stick. So this is not an easy design by any means, but it is good to always challenge yourself, and you can always flash cure in between like I'm doing here, and then, you know, of course do your full cure at the end. But flash curing in between is really great, just so that you don't have to worry about messing up your design. And I really like this kind of cordless lamp from Amazon that you can recharge, very handy and easy to use. Then for her arm, we're just drawing a little circle on the broomstick, and then drawing for her hand, and then drawing the rest of her is pretty much just kind of an angled line, and we're just adding depth to that a little bit more slowly, you know, adding a little bit more at a time versus adding it all at once really helps. And then we're just drawing the neck, and then for her head, we're just drawing the top of her head and then the bottom, and then drawing kind of the outline of her hair first and filling that in. I did like the first half of her head, and then the face is the hardest part, so pretty much just drawing the top of her head and then kind of following those curvatures that we see in the picture, you know, making sure we're kind of dipping in for her nose and then kind of squaring that off for her mouth and chin area. And again, once you fill it in, you know, unless you have cured already, you can go back and kind of redefine and slightly adjust those lines as needed. And then we're gonna draw the outline of her bow, which is also super important. And we're just drawing the kind of 2 rounded circles on either side and filling that in. And then we're gonna draw the center of the bow and then the other side of the bow. I ended up making this a little bit too tall, so I went back and shortened it and rounded it out a little bit more. I wanted it to be more round versus tall, so you can always erase that little part and redo it. And that was the end of that design. Once it's fully cured, I top coated it to seal everything in, and love how that one turned out. Super cute. The Aurora petal gel polish just adds the perfect touch to it in the background. Now we're gonna do some lettering, and I don't think I had enough space to write KIKI'S delivery service, and that would have been a lot of work, but I at least wanted to write KIKI'S. So I'm just taking a white gel paint and a micro detailer brush and outlining those letters. We're gonna add a Diva Mermaid Chrome. I think it's Pretty Diva is the brand, and it's kind of like an Aurora Mermaid Chrome, kind of translucent powder at the end over the lettering. So once we go ahead and outline everything and cure, we'll do a very small amount of top coat over it, non-wipe, and then add in the chrome powder. I'm just showing here kind of my reference points for the letters, just making sure that things kind of line up where needed. I just kind of like try to compare where things are, so you can see like here the bottom of the letters where they stop, and then how the end of that K kind of accentuates out. So those are kind of the things I try to keep in mind when I'm drawing letters, and you can always go back and add a little bit more if needed. So like this K ended up being too short, so I went ahead and extended that before I cured everything. And then the lettering here, kind of the key to it is that the tops or the edges of the letters are kind of rounded. So you can just take a small brush and just kind of create that rounded shape and connect everything. But otherwise they're pretty kind of straightforward. You just want to try to copy the image as closely as you can, again breaking down those shapes. And then I'm using a combination of a 9mm brush and a micro detailer brush where needed. I think the micro detailer definitely helps more where you need to round out the letters, gives you a little bit more control. And then the 9mm brush is really great for just drawing the longer lines itself. A longer liner brush always helps, like I'm showing here, to get more longer kind of straighter lines. And then the micro detailer brush is good for exactly what the brush says, just really small details. If you've never tried like drawing a logo or lettering, I would definitely encourage you to give it a try. It is very intimidating at first, but I had a lot of fun doing this type of design for Halloween nail sets last year. So I try to incorporate it wherever I can, especially if I'm doing like a movie themed set. And it just kind of helps to use a gel paint versus a gel polish because those are a thicker consistency. It's gonna give you a little bit more control. So anyhow, I will let you just watch me finish this design, and then I will come back when we add in the chrome powder. So we are going to use this non-wipe gel top coat and just apply that over the white gel polish with a small detailer brush. And the reason I didn't end up just doing like the white gel paint mixed with the non-wipe top coat is because it was gonna become a pretty runny consistency, like you saw with the chrome design we did with the silhouette of Kiki on the broom. So I did want to have like the preciseness of the gel paint for the lettering, you know, a design like this. Didn't want it to be too runny, so I would have just rather, you know, drawn the white gel paint letters here, fully cured it, and then went back and added the top coat. But you do have multiple options, so you can see what works best for you. And then we are using this Pretty Diva Mermaid Chrome Powder. This is a really nice kind of Aurora Chrome Powder. It's kind of translucent, but it adds this really nice Aurora finish over whatever gel polish you put it over. So I'm just using an applicator to put that on. You can also use your fingers with gloves, and you can see it adds this really cool effect. So I thought it was perfect for this kind of pinkish purple, very cute Halloween themed set. And then just using a makeup sponge again to wipe off the excess. And once it's fully cured, we're gonna add our top coat and cure again. And that is it for the thumb. And the pinky is the most simple design. So I'm just using this magenta gel paint and just working my brush into that. This is kind of how I do it, kind of like wiggle and like move the brush around just so that I get an even distribution. We're gonna draw a French tip, and then we're gonna start drawing a spider web within that. So just drawing kind of radiating lines. And then we're gonna draw these upside down U shapes. The key to making the spider web effect kind of look like a spider web is just making sure those lines are really curved. If they're too straight, you're not gonna get that effect. So just go back and make them more U-shaped when needed. And then I'm applying that chrome powder over that again. In this case, I just did it over the gel polish like after like 20 seconds. And then I ended up using a silicone tool to just rub that in, and I fully cured that, and then I top coated that to finish off. Here is the final result and how everything turned out. Super cute for a pink themed Halloween set. And I'm excited I got to show you some of the products that we used here that'll be releasing very soon for the polygels and gel polishes. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in next week's tutorial.